Hello and welcome back to Overcoming Polarisation, Paths to Common Ground, the podcast series from Debating Europe, Friends of Europe's Citizen Engagement Unit. As always, I'm your host, Sabina Șancu. Let's face it, Europe is feeling fractured. Whether it's politics, climate, tech, or trust in institutions, more and more people are feeling left out, unheard, and uncertain about the future. But what if we could flip the script? What if instead of fueling division, we looked for common ground? In this series, we're diving into the real issues behind polarization. Economic inequality, climate anxiety, digital disruption, and we're bringing together voices from across the spectrum, from policymakers to activists, business leaders, and most importantly, citizens' voices via our latest study, Voices for Choices. We're not just talking problems, we're exploring solutions that are fair, inclusive, and built to last. So, if you're ready to hear thoughtful conversations that go beyond the headlines and into the heart of what's dividing us, and what could bring us back together, stick around. This is Overcoming Polarization. Let's get started. Now, as promised, we're also going to be discussing what brings us back together, because in the last few episodes, you've heard a lot about the things that divide us, not only in the special episode, which I really recommend you go check out. We published that ahead of the International Day of Democracy on the 15th of September. But in the series, if you go back and listen to some of the episodes, we discuss some of the most contentious aspects of current life, whether that be coming together with other people to create policies, the trust that we have towards each other or the one that we don't have, the common defense of our European Union. All of these things they're exhausting. Let's admit it. All of these divisions are exhausting. So in hopes of also creating something that gives us a vision for the future, in this episode, we're exploring what could bring us back together. And I have two wonderful guests who have unique approaches on what can bring people together. My first guest is Thomas Coombes. He's the founder and director of Hope-Based Communications, which is an organization that promotes, well, it's in the term itself, hope-based communications, and helps international organizations communicate differently, speak to the public in a way that gives them more hope for the future, gives them an actionable path forward. And this also helps people who are very politically involved stay afloat in times that are as difficult as these. My other guest is Jakub Szczepanik. He's the artistic director at the National Theatre in Krakow, and he's also one of our European young leaders from the class of 2025. Jakub has a view on how theatre can bring people together, let us explore societal divisions in a safe way, but also lets us imagine a different, better future. So that being said, I'll invite you to listen to the conversations, and we'll start with Thomas.
I'm kind of almost struggling with it a little bit because I don't, my wife keeps telling me to say I'm a founder, but I'm trying to make hope-based more of a method and a mindset. So I'm not an organization, right? It's something I want to share with the world. So I often would just say I'm like the creator of the hope-based approach, and I'm just on a mission to apply brain science to human rights. And I basically work with activists around the world to help them use this approach to focus on the change they want to see.
I saw that you had quite a bit of experience in the NGO sector, so I was wondering where this hope guy came from.
It's ironic. So I was working at Amnesty International. I'm not a positive person. So the name really just comes from the people who know me finding it hilarious that I'm the one talking about hope, because I'm the really negative, grumpy, sarcastic person. But so I was working at Amnesty International. But I'm also very, very passionate about human rights. It's the family business. My family were refugees. I just really, really care. And I was like, we just saw that fear is such a powerful force, and it was making people support populists. It's making people not welcome refugees. And so I just had to start engaging with the psychology and the neuroscience, stop just communicating facts to make change. And I just realized hope is a strategic thing to do. From there, I realized, so the starting point was just like people are more likely to have empathy for people if they're hopeful. But from there, I realized how do we hope? And I also at the same time looked at narratives, and I could see that in activism and human rights activism, we're very reactive. So we actually reinforce harmful narratives, right? We would say refugees are not criminals. And we weren't actually saying what we want the narrative to be. Like, actually, like, what are refugees? Maybe the refugees are human beings, just like you and me. And so what I could see was that my colleagues weren't reading PDFs that in which all the messaging guides were coming. So what I was trying to realize is, how do I actually just get every activist or, lawyer or whoever to sit down and ask themselves, what is it I want the message to be? What is my narrative? So I don't just react to what a Salvini or a Marine Le Pen or whoever says, but actually say my own thing. And so that's when basically created this checklist at Amnesty based on this idea of hope, but this one became hope-based, which in a way, even some people don't like the hope stuff. It's really just about basing what you say on the outcome you hope to achieve. And so that's how it's evolved. And then basically I started, left Amnesty just to share it with more people because there was this massive demand for it.
That's really lovely. I think especially working among people who are in communications and seeing the world in front of us, it's something that's very needed. It's a very dire situation out here.
We have this instinct, we all have this built-in negativity bias that means our natural reaction when we see something bad is to call it out. And so what I'm realizing, and I just need to have the time to develop this element of it, that it's not just a good activist tool, it's actually a good tool for all of us human beings to actually just be conscious of when we're operating in that reactive mode of our brain, and then pause, take a breath, and I say, okay, like, I'm reactive, I'm angry, or I'm worried about something. What do I want instead? So that we can then refocus our action. And like, if anyone wants to feel hope, here's where I get my hope from right now is, if you look at the world, look at how much resource is going into spreading fear and division. Like, look at all the Russian propaganda efforts, all the bots out there, all the really well-funded far-right people on social media. And then look at how many, there's like hardly anyone is investing in like building empathy, compassion, trust for its own sake, right? The forces that depend on that are just taking it for granted. So imagine if we took just a fraction of the communication resource and put it into bring out the best in human nature. Like, imagine what we could do.
I wanted to hop into my next question, which is about creating trust and building bridges into a society that seems very divided. Because we've seen how trust can operate when it's used well. One of my guests, Eugene Slavny from United 24 Media, talked about the fact that Ukrainians aren't necessarily fighting for the state. They're fighting for their community, for their people. And then I talked to Professor Graham Smith about climate assemblies and about how bringing people together from like all these different walks of life, they built a basis of respect, and then they start suggesting things, speaking to other people in the room, not speaking as if they were alone in a room, caring about what impact these policies would have on other people from other walks of life. And distrust, on the other hand, which is so widespread now, is affecting every level of society. And, even though it's a really big ask, I was wondering, what do you think it would take to functionally rebuild some of the broken trust bonds in society?
Yeah, I think trust is key. And it's really key in terms of hope and fear. So when you mention trust, I go straight to this philosopher, Martin Nussbaum, who wrote this book right after Trump's first election called Monarchy of Fear. And it really shaped how I think about the role of emotions in our politics. And basically the idea that we don't just, we have to be conscious of them. And they're like a thing that we adapt just like we do with facts and information. And basically her key point is that trust is key in a democracy. Democracies are built on trust. In fact, I have the book because I have to quote it directly because she says it so beautifully. She says, trust means being willing to be exposed to allow your own future to lie in the hands of your fellow citizens, which is essentially basically a hopeful worldview, as in we believe that our fellow citizens are good people and we can trust our own fate with them, whereas the monarch or the authoritarian doesn't need the authoritarian actually needs us to not trust each other so that we give them all the power. And so that is basically trust is at the heart of democracy, essentially. And it's all like psychologists always talk about trust in terms of game theory, right? You know, if we're like, do I share the pot with the other person? If I think they're going to keep it for themselves, then I'm more likely to keep it myself. So really what this actually is about is what's the story we tell about human nature? And this is again why all of us with the stories we tell shape our reality. And there's this beautiful documentary right now on the BBC called Human, where they can just reinforce how in our very origins, like 200,000 years ago, cooperation isn't just part of human nature. It's literally what made us who we are. But it's if we have this mindset of I think it's quite dangerous actually. The European Union, in a lot of its policies and rhetoric, is spreading this like competition or competitiveness in it is like the goal, or also just the fear towards migrants. It's actually undermining the very ways of thinking on which all of European integration is built. I mean, having said that, it's important to say that there are many reasons for us not to have distrust. Like we've had this financial crisis, and most leaders seem more interested in just blaming migrants for everything wrong with the economy rather than like reforming the financial system. But if we want to bring about positive social change, we have to be really conscious that of the fine balance between cynicism and skepticism, right? So like we're skeptical, we can criticize, but if we're cynical and we believe change will never happen, then change will never happen. Like what's the alternative to, say, like the current financial system? Let's say it's an economy that's more built on cooperation, on sharing. And like, same with austerity, right? It involves spending more money on each other, which purely depends on trust. So much of harmful political rhetoric is, again, undermining trust. Oh, unemployed people, they're just lazy. They're going to take that money they get and waste it, right? It's all about not just mistrust, but a mistrustful view of human nature. And so actually any kind of better world we want to build depends on trust. And so populists have it easy in a way, because if they come to power and cause more crisis and damage, they actually reinforce the very mistrust that their power is built on. But if we want that better world, the kind of anger and cynicism is really dangerous for us, because the very alternative we want to build actually is undermined by it. So again, with hope-based, what we're trying to do is say, have this shift, problem to solution. Talk about the problem, but every single time you talk about a problem, you have to also offer the solution, put that problem in the context of the alternative. So like, these politicians don't have our best interest at heart, but there are politicians who do. You know, politics doesn't have to be always in the hands of the elite, let's say. And then on a bigger level also, I think on this point of like trust, how do we actually build trust practically for our democracy? I think it's really just also important of this sense with communication, not just being about words, but about action. So like we build ideas, not just through like telling people facts. Like we really have to get past, hey guys, democracy is good, you should support it. But actual real life rituals, let's say, actions that people can do that give them the experience of democracy and the experience of trust. And, I think a lot of people have analyzed how loneliness and a sense of, being disconnected is part of the problem. And populists are actually working quite hard to give people this sense of community and connection. So if there's any cause ever that we wanted to build, whatever that cause is, what we ask people in a hope-based workshop is, what does it look like for people to be part of it?
Yeah, and it's really difficult at this time because we're so online, not just because of the rise of technology, but also because the pandemic and lockdowns have gotten us used to being physically disconnected from people and going into not only echo chambers, but real life groups of more like-minded people. And we don't have contentious conversations as easily, which I was talking about with Ali Goldsworthy about the value of having like intergenerational communication, of admitting that you're wrong, and things like these. So I wanted to pick your brain about these contentious conversations that we need to have, not only with people who are on the other side of the political spectrum, but those that we're trying to make our allies. How do we bring up difficult conversations with those close to us? And should we? And how do we mediate small differences that feel enormous in trying to act upon something?
I think the conversation is important, but what's interesting is how do we frame it? So if we frame a conversation as contentious conversations, if we frame a conversation we're about to have as contentious, then it's more likely to be contentious. And whereas if we were to use a hope-based approach and say, let's have a conciliatory conversation, it's more likely to become conciliatory. So really interesting research in brain science around how concepts drive our action, basically the words we put on things. So our brain loves to categorize things, but those concepts actually drive our behavior, even our emotions, right? So we put names to emotions, we're more likely to then feel those emotions. And so again, our brains are predictive. So if we say, oh, I'm about to have like a conflictual conversation with this racist uncle, it's more likely to be conflictual. Lisa Feldman Barrett is the neuroscientist who says it. She basically says our brains are constantly creating our social reality. And then we engage with other people and we make it reality. So like we might have an idea in our head, but the way we then actually engage with people. And so this directly impacts our politics. Like if we go into our politics with the mindset we are divided, we are going to be more divided. So that's where that group More in Common are really important, because they actually provide us with evidence that show we actually have more in common with people than divides us. But it's actually really important, again, with our communication.
I discussed in a previous episode the notion of cognitive rigidity. So people who have strong political views, which is most people nowadays, tend to kind of like solidify into those and find it harder to bend either which way. And then a lot of the young people who participated in our Voices for Choices study say that they find it hard to speak about things like politics to friends, coworkers, family, or to say simply, I don't know. And that leaves people very isolated, I think. So I was wondering about your take on how to add more flexibility and nuance into these conversations and actually bring people together into discussing these rather than avoiding things.
The starting point for me, again, we're trying to shift from fear to hope, is that fear shuts down the parts of our brain that are responsible for planning, like for the future, for perspective taking, right? For thinking about the perspective of other people. And so we have this instinct built into us to have that fear, but we also have the tools for thinking about other people. We have mirror neurons. We've evolved to operate in groups. So we have the tools to have conversations, to understand, to live together, but we just have to learn to use them. I think a key way we can move away from the fear into that more open space, this neuroscientist Judson Brewer talks about curiosity being the cure to fear. So I think one thing we can do is be mindful of our nature, of our brain, how it works, and say, oh yeah, okay, I'm in a space where I'm shut down, so I'm not actually listening to the person. Just first being mindful and curious about that helps us already step out of that reactive fear space and then actually train ourselves. So what's interesting when hope comes in then is there's this theory from psychology called hope theory, that when we are high in hope, which is about goal setting, we are able to find alternative pathways to our goal. Whereas when we're low in hope, we're just stuck doing the same old thing. And what I think about then is me, the human rights communicator, writing press releases in an era where very few people are reading newspapers and everyone's making videos on TikTok, but I still do the same tactics. Or our organizations releasing 50-page PDFs or 100-page PDFs when no one's reading them because we're low in hope and we're using our old tactics. So there's your cognitive rigidity. Hope is a cognitive function. It's not just some, like wishy-washy thing. It's a thing we can train. So can we train it on the level of society? And again, this just comes down to like the stories we tell, the reality we create with our words. Do we celebrate the politician who's certain and won't change their mind no matter what? I think that's what happens today. If someone changes their mind, they get attacked. We can change that again with our words. Like the politician who shows vulnerability and says, I'm not sure. If we react to them and say, I admire that, like literally just me seeing you saying you admire the politician, that already starts shaping my brain. And so what we have to do is step out of our reactive way of seeing that like the clever person is the one who's always critical. We have to actually reinforce and celebrate the leaders, the politicians who sort of lead the way in terms of, say, curiosity and openness.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think a lot of young people are seeing the media and politicians as conduits of this polarization because of their discourse, because of the messages they send. And they, again, to go back to our study, people from all of these countries do have one solution to go on the hopeful side. They do have one solution in common, which is that they think education is essential in bringing society back together. And of course, that's a very abstract solution, and everyone can interpret it any which way. So what is your interpretation on how education can bring people back together?
Yeah, it's interesting because I never thought I would be engaging with education. Like once I got out of the Irish education system, I was done. And I'm like, for me, it's focused all on human rights. Like, how do we stop hate and genocide? And I'm actually, as I look at the neuroscience and realize that empathy and kindness are things we can learn and train. And we can train ourselves to be curious about people who are different and care about their perspective. Suddenly I'm realizing, oh, actually, the future of human rights and maybe democracy lies in education, both perhaps the traditional education system, but also making citizenship about just lifelong education, right? But I think there's a potential here that the big transformation of our era isn't artificial intelligence, but emotional intelligence. As in, if we learn about our neurobiology, how our thinking, our politics, our behavior is driven by our genes, our DNA, our chemicals, our hormones, I think we could actually transform generally our societies.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for the hope angle. Now, on to my conversation with Jakub about the power of theater. I wanted to look at the world that we're living in, and I was thinking that it wouldn't be a stretch to say that we live at a time when culture has taken a step back, right? If not disappeared from a lot of people's lives. We consume content instead of, looking at art or expressing ourselves creatively. And it's a term that betrays its function as something to be consumed, something that's mass produced, and kind of like lost a bit of the human touch of the identity of it. And then on the other side, you also have governments across Europe that are defunding culture. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, what effect does this culturally impoverished life have on society?
From the very beginning, I think we have two really huge problems that we have to face it now, those days, in Europe, but also globally. In the context of culture, for me, those two things, first is populism. The second is capitalism. And of course, both are strongly connected to each other. I will start it from populism because it's really my perspective, which also I have here in Poland because of also our inner political, social situation which we have last decades. Yes, so first of all, and here maybe it will be something which could be surprising for you also, because this populism, on the one hand, yes, it's destroyed in a way some kind of the sectors of the culture, but also we could say that on the other hand, the culture is really important for the populists in Poland, but also in a way in Hungary, of course, in a way what's happening in Russia. All those countries really put a huge attention on the really concrete sector of the culture. Mostly it's like the connected with the history and try to build this kind of the narration which you can build this idea of the culture which could support those politics, those populists in their narration. Of course, it's really often, as it was, for example, in Polish example, national, conservative, in a way, really Catholic narration, which they need for their politics. So, of course, from this perspective, we could say yes. On the other hand, culture is something that disappeared now in Europe. Of course, all those cuts which are related to the culture, really dangerous situation, of course, because we could say that it's this central liberal governments. And also, unfortunately, now it's the, in a way, example in Poland, maybe more now in the local governments than in the main government. For now, we could say that it's not really any announcement that it will be some cuts for the Ministry of Culture, but of course, it's a lot like in these local communities. And it's a huge problem because then we had these two things. On the one hand, we see this economical crisis. We see the problem which is related to, for example, this weaponizing of the societies. Many countries in Europe now, we have this situation. So a lot of politicians thinking that maybe it's good to put this money from a culture to army. But on the other hand, we have the politicians who are, we could say in a way, our, let's say in general, enemies, I think, like related to these violent politics, which are trying to Putin or Russia or different other politics, which of course try to put this huge pressure on the European Union countries. And they put really huge attention on the culture. For example, to promote not only Russian culture, but only a kind of way of the culture, which is a tool, we could say even a kind of the propaganda culture, which is, and it could be a powerful tool to try to build a picture of the world where we could say that this idea of white, strong, patriarchal way of thinking, this is my starting point. This fear that on the one hand easily took away money from the culture, that could be a powerful tool also to help us to understand diverse, tolerant society. And on the other hand, some of the politicians use that culture in a totally different way. So those are, of course, really huge two problematic situation which we have, and they are extremely connected. And the second, which I started from the very beginning, is this problem of capitalism. We are living in this really, we could say on the one hand, interesting, but it's also a really danger moment that for us, it's a huge question. Who is artist? What is the artwork anymore? It's a question also about the quality of this piece of art and the proposal which are stand behind, because it's easy to produce content, but also, and back to the beginning of your question, this is a huge question: what kind of art should be donated from the state, from the government? What should be this culture which is alternative for this commercial production in any field? It could be like, in a film of movies, like streaming platform versus artistic, but commercial theaters or the state theaters, what they should produce, what should be donated, and what is the vision and the mission of the now, let's say, public culture, which in my opinion should support society and build better future. Because I always love to do that. What exactly artists produce, in my opinion, we produce mostly as stories, but mostly we should produce the stories or at itself produce better future. And of course, now it could be a really long discussion what it is, this better future. But let's say really general, that it is this way of thinking that we could live in equal, fair society, which has not violence as we see, for example, now in also European countries.
I'm interested in this vision for a better future, because a lot of the plays that you put on have a lot to do with very dark history and very controversial moments from now. And it's things that challenge the social and political and institution status quo in Poland. And I'm wondering a bit about your vision behind putting these on and in the public sphere, and connected to that, what you think is the role of art in politics and whether we should push for more political art in times like these.
Most of my performances starts from fear. This fear is, of course, really present in my country, in Poland, the country which we could say, of course, not only Poland, but those countries from this part of Europe are, in my mind, we could say that the place of never-ending wars, which are going from west and east. Of course, this is a story also of my family, which my grandparents born in Poland, which is not Poland anymore. They were relocated after the Second World War from Lviv, from Vilnius, from the different parts. And of course, these stories, those traumas also, because we have to name it like this, war traumas, are really present. And I think also what's happened now, it's straight consequences of those old traumas, which we try to hide it for 1 or 2 generations, and came back all the time. So my performances came from fears against the violent society, which really easily also can exclude some of the groups, some of the people of race, people because of their identity, orientation, etc. I'm really afraid of that. So it started from then, but I also really believe that theater, and maybe this is tricky, it's or even art, this is a really powerful and safe place to really test first, where is the line now? Where is this limit of what we can do? From the ancient time, we understand, for example, how theaters worked. That this is the place we could tell a story and fight with the gods, with the social rules, with ourselves, with morality. And in the end, no one should die there. I think we mostly understand it. Of course, populistic politicians really often use the culture and try to convince the society that they don't understand those rules, and accuse artists for example, some of the things that they are trying to do on the stage, and try to attack them as equal as they could do something same as in normal life. Of course, those are the problem with this or accusation. If someone working on try to deal with the national symbols of the religious symbol, it's really now often this is the tension, of course, in the society. And of course, the stage, it is and it always was the place to work with that. So of course, I think that the art is wonderful place to test it, and it was in Poland, and I think still it is in Europe. And the second thing, I think that now it's also, and I started, as I said, I started my work from the fears, but mostly I try to inspire my co-workers, artists that I worked with, but also my audience to dream. Because dream is now the most political tool that we could have. I think our politics, but also our societies, only respond for those narration which believe in power, masculinity, etc. And I think our role, that role of the artists, it's to start to dream again and inspire, because I really believe in that if we start to really dream about something which is important for us, then we will fight for it so much stronger than to answer of what we had from the other side. So this dreaming is really important, and this looking into the future. I think this looking into the future is also really important, because I think also art could be a wonderful place to speculate about the future. We could test the things. And for example, from my work I did in 2023, really important performance about the situation in the children's psychiatry in Poland. it was disaster. It's still a really difficult situation. It was strongly connected with the huge homophobia which was present after presidential election in 2020. The number of the suicides in the teenager was really high in Poland, and we did performance about that. But in the end, in the last scene, we decide that we will do possibilities for our audience, for the people from Poland, that they could take part in a way, of course, on this stage, ceremony of the wedding for the people of the same gender, for the queer people, gay, lesbian, trans, etc. And we did in Poland almost 60 weddings for those people. They are coming with the families. Like, of course, in Poland, it's still impossible. This equality for the LGBTQ plus community, it's still not yet here present, but we dream about that. We stage it in a theater. This was really important. We stage it in the public theater, so we create a reality, and thousands of people saw it, that this is not something which is impossible, and mostly this is not something which is against someone. This is in the name of someone's freedom, someone really equal right to be himself in the society.
I think it's beautiful. It's transformative, and especially at a time when a lot of the discourse that we have, it's criticism and it's the collapse of certain systems, or at least a choking of certain systems. But few people ever dare to put something else forward. We're not really living in a time of great new ideas anymore. And I'm wondering, because with theater, it used to be a form of mass entertainment, especially anyone could understand what was happening right in front of them. They didn't have to read it. But now theater has passed into this realm of a more elite, let's say, interest. So even with these, like, this innovative political agenda and this really, like, real potential for impact, is the fact that theater has become something a bit for elites, something that stands in the way for it to have mass political impact?
My experiences are quite interesting because, for example, I work in Poland, so which we have this huge infrastructure also, but in this communism period of time, the theater were the place which was important. And in the Polish tradition, national theater, public theater, was established in 1765 as a part of the national reforms to help the society. So this tradition of Polish theater as a tool to support society, it's really strong. It's also my, in a way, experience for working in Estonia, where in Estonia during Soviet Union also it was a powerful tool, because it was one and only place that publicly you could speak in Estonian. So of course those are the places where the theater was not something dedicated to the elite, to the upper class, let's say, or you could say bourgeois. It's really present. It's really connected with the society. Now it starts to change. Theater could be wonderful tool, and it's not something bad that it could be a tool for the elite, because then it could have this impact to change the reality, to influence those people who it's more possible that could change reality. But in my opinion, and it's how I really mostly like to work, not only as a theater director, but more as artistic director of now National Theatre in Krakow, or previous in contemporary theater in Szczecin. This is my dream, to build an institution, to make from the theater place which could be curate for all of the people that create a society. I also think that, on the other hand, the theater should be, even in the artistic ensemble, but also as an institution, as precise as could be, representative of the society as itself. So this is like where we need people of color if the society is diverse. So also people with disabilities, for whom the representation on the stage, it's extremely important. This idea of representation for me, it's also really political, really important. And I think this is something which is extremely we put huge attention in National Theatre in Krakow, mostly because it's also one of the two national stages in Poland. I think theaters is really and always was really powerful and strong because the theater it's fast. You could create really in this specific time and moment really fast and sometimes strong reaction of what's happening in society.
Yeah, the speed. I think you're really right on with that. Immediately you're immersed in what's happening in front of you. You are empathizing, which empathy is a hot commodity these days. But I want to look also outside of art itself, because I think artists are really remarkable people within society, within the function of society. And I think one of the most important examples that we have in Europe nowadays is theater actors from Serbia, because it was the students from the Faculty of Dramatic Arts that started the protests after the collapse of the canopy at the train station in Novi Sad. It was the theater actors who were some of the first groups of people in industries to strike and to join the street protests. And I'm thinking, in other countries that may or may not be in similar crises, beyond their art, how can artists themselves contribute to promoting unity, peace, or other important social causes?
The artists are also the regular people, so I'm also a little bit afraid to maybe try to describe them as someone more than the others. I think it's really important if we also, and this was I think huge change which happened in Poland in this last decade, that artists are really change this vector and start to ask the audience what are your needs, how we can help I mean society to build this better future, to really face it, our problems, difficulties which we still have in our society. So first of all, I think this is really important, to build this really important way of thinking in this in a group of the artists, that we are the part of the society. This is something which really often also populists want to change it. Like, this is why they are looking in the past, because this nostalgia is, of course, extremely connected with their political programs of how they are construct their politics, but also it's safe. If you convince the artist, the society, that we should stage this most important examples from our canon literature, etc., then it's so safe for the politicians, because artists are not looking and try to describe the reality, which is so much more important and danger for them, because then we also want to in a way have to build a dialogue, which is of course always danger for the politics. And yes, you gave a wonderful example. I think I was really moved what happened in Serbia, because I think it was an act of really huge courage what they did. I think it's also because of that we are in this way, I could say, in a way privileged in a society, because our job is also in a way work and analyze what is important we could say in our lives, in our reality. We should, I think artists should have these possibilities, and it's why, for example, we need this state founding to really not have this capitalistic pressure of the economy, of the money to earn something, but sometimes ask the really difficult question: what is needed, which kind of the story, which kind of the action it's really needed now for us. It's really difficult, mostly in those days when the politics start to use theatrical tools to make the politics, when facts are not any longer important. The important is show that politics could do. this is really important. But in the end, I think real artists, and it was this example, and sometimes we could say that it's something really political or normal, but I think the protest, it's always performative act, and it could be. And for example, if I try to now remind to myself a wonderful example of the performative protest, which is happening in the Baltic countries in the beginning of 90s, this Baltic wave from Vilnius to Estonia, like, hundreds of the kilometers of the people who stand one by one and take each other their hands. It's a wonderful, peaceful protest which changed the reality.
Thank you so much, Jakub, and thank you, Thomas, as well. At the risk of overusing the term hope, doing an episode like this makes me feel very hopeful in the fact that we have not even explored all of the tools that can help us build a better future. And these are definitely lessons that are going to stick with me, and I hope they're going to stick with you as well. If you liked this episode, interact in the comments. You'll probably have seen this on social media. For us, that's mostly Instagram and LinkedIn. So leave a comment down below if this inspired you to think differently. As always, I've been your host, Sabina Șancu, and you'll hear from me next time.